Hey everybody, here's a little bit more to help you specifically with Marx. So you've done your work on the Industrial Revolution. Now let's situate Marx in the midst of that. And to do that, we go back in history and first take a look at capitalism. Capitalism replaced feudalism. That's the view that we look at when we came to understand the paradigm shift of faith being replaced by reason in the shift to the age of reason. This is what you've been writing about. But capitalism is an economic or political economy. So it's a social and economic system that emerges with the accumulation of capital or wealth by what Marx calls the bourgeoisie or the capitalists. And the creation of a free, that is not serf, not indentured to the land, a free labor force, which Marx calls the proletariat. What Marx brings to attention is that there is a tension between capital and labor. And Marx argues that these two classes must eventually conflict. And that's a lot of the model that he's building up that you'll read about in the original work that we read for class. So what Marx is doing, what Marx brings to us, is a critique of capitalism in terms of the human costs. So when we looked at Adam Smith and the components of markets that as he saw them, there were resources and capital and labor. And we talked about the fact that labor is different from resources and capital in the sense that labor is attached to people. And what does that mean? Well, Marx comes to show us another way of looking at what this means. And it is in that context of thinking about the impact and the human cost that Marx builds up an approach called Marxism. It's a socialist movement that's committed to ending alienation or the loss of self. So when you do the reading, you'll be getting a sense that Marx introduces these two economic classes. We'll talk about social class in other ways in this course as well, but he focuses very squarely on the bourgeoisie or the owners and the proletariat or the workers. These classes are groups of individuals who share a common position in relation to the means of production. So if you think about these classes, what happens with them is that they share together common goals, common cultural sense of what they have or what they want to have. And it is from the idea of classes, proletariat, bourgeoisie, that Marx develops this idea of class consciousness, or the way that he seeks to make workers aware or conscious of their status as a class of people, not just their individual burden, but their connection to other workers as a class, and how that can lead to change. Now, one of the things about the proletariat is that while the bourgeoisie own property, the proletariat are people who own their labor, and they own their labor through wages. One of the things in the reading that we'll be talking about from the economic and philosophic manuscripts is what that means to be a wage laborer. Of course, people are free to refuse labor, but as I was explaining in the industrialization video, you need to sell your labor in order to exchange money for goods. The market way of living is impossible to escape at this point. So what you've got here, I'm going to leave us to this introduction, is that Karl Marx is writing in response to the industrialization, the Industrial Revolution. He's working to think about the humanity of labor. He builds on that three-part model of political economy that Smith talks about and says, well, labor has a special status that is human. And what does that mean? He identifies laborers, the owners of labor, as the proletariat, or the class that is ultimately in conflict with owners. We'll talk about how that conflict emerges, how that works, and you'll read the logic of the humanity and the loss of humanity that Marx sees in the conditions of labor and the conditions of the economy that he sees around him in the text that we read. But above all, the method of change that Marx is emphasizing is the notion of class consciousness, or the awareness of common interests across the working class. Not my individual burden, but our shared condition. So have at it, and we will discuss further in class.